I'm Richard O'Donoghue, and you're very welcome to another podcast from Finance Connect on the European asset finance industry. In our last three podcasts, we've been talking all things AI with Richard Houston of Vamos, Colin Tovey of Resilient, and Brian Murphy from our sponsors Alpha Systems. Today, we're going to switch gears and talk about one of Europe's wealthiest and apparently happiest regions, the Nordics. To help me explore this topic, I'm delighted to be joined from Copenhagen by Peter Englev. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
So today we're going to talk about the Nordics, and you've been in the market for a long time, but for people who don't know you, maybe just give us a little bit of your background and talk about your experience in the Nordic asset finance market.
Sure. Well, my name is Peter Englev. I've been working 35 years in the Nordic asset finance market. I'm based in Copenhagen, but I've worked at several local and international lease companies with Nordic responsibility during my entire career. So I have built business units from scratch into profitable business. I have successfully managed Nordic teams and also a lot of P&L responsibility. In addition, I have an executive management program from INSEAD.
And have you worked in specific verticals or across all verticals during that 35 years?
I have worked a lot into the construction, transportation and industrial equipment market, but also in the beginning of my career within coffee machines and IT equipment, but predominantly within transportation and construction area.
Well, the good news is I know virtually nothing about construction and transportation, so there won't be any difficult questions about that topic. There might be some very naive or simple questions about it, but maybe let's start about generally the Nordics and leasing culture. A lot of markets in Europe still have a very ownership type culture. Is that the case in the Nordics?
I would say in the Nordics overall, we have a quite high lease penetration, and I would say especially within construction, transportation and agriculture. That includes cranes and forklifts. When it comes to IT equipment like smartphones, laptops, you often see that companies purchase this type of equipment cash and fully depreciated over 3 years. That said, we still see a lot of leasing within the industry, and I would consider the leasing penetration to be high as well, but less compared to the other mentioned verticals.
Is that a historic thing, or is that, that there is more focus perhaps on construction and construction leasing, or it's just more expensive equipment? Is there any reason why you see those differences between the verticals?
I think it's cultural, but also, of course, the investment. I mean, if you purchase 10 trucks, it comes to a size of amount for investment, and you need to find some kind of finance.
Sure.
But and again, if it's IT equipment, I mean, who would consider to finance an iPhone? I mean, you just purchase it. It's easy to do, and I mean, but of course, if you consider a full bunch of equipment for the company, that's another situation.
Mind you, with the rising price of memory and PCs, maybe that will all change. But maybe let's talk then about the markets again as a whole. And what do you feel is the biggest misconception that outsiders have of the Nordics?
Yeah, let me see. Actually, the Nordics consists of 5 countries.
Okay.
Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Iceland.
Okay. A lot of people exclude Iceland when they think of the Nordics.
Exactly. And I would say in this context, I would exclude Iceland as well. But let's come back into that. And I would say in the Nordics, we are around 30 million people. And it can be tempting to see it as a single market. But you will find a high degree of, let's say, educated people and a digitalized society in all the countries. But you have to be aware that it is and consists of 4 different cultures, 4 different languages, currencies, and actually interest rates, due to the fact we are talking financial world here. That's important.
Does the regulatory environment differ in each of the countries as well?
It does. If we start with the business culture, there are things to consider and things that you need to navigate in if you want to do business in the Nordics. In Denmark, we normally chat a bit before the meeting begins. It's very important and don't need to be aware of it. Whereas in Finland, they're more direct. They go straight to the business. Whereas in Norway, you need to invest time in the meeting to achieve the best results. It takes time to do business in Norway, but in many aspects, I would say it's worthwhile the effort. And when it comes to Sweden, you will find a consensus-driven culture. It can be time-consuming, but in the end, when the decision is taken, everybody sticks to that.
So you're giving me a Nordic cultural lesson from a Danish perspective. If I was to ask a Swedish person, do you think they would summarize it in the same way?
Yeah, because I've had a lot of Nordic teams and Nordic colleagues, and I would say that is what I hear from them as well. I mean, and we are aware of it, and nothing is wrong and nothing is right. And yeah, but it's important that you know and that you are aware of it, and nobody dislike or anything else because of this culture. That's just the way it is.
Does that mean that in Denmark it's faster to do deals than, say, in Norway, where perhaps you have to spend more time developing relationships at the start? Or is that, again, just a misconception on my part? It's just a different way of doing business, but deals still happen at the same speed.
Well, the deals hopefully still happens, but no, it is to some extent faster to do business in Denmark because each part wants to do the business and wants to get it quickly done. But there's some phrases in the beginning that you need to be, well, how are you going? What's the environment? But in Norway, I feel at least that the business is more personal.
Right.
Not relationship is important all over, but it's more personalized in Norway, I would
say. I guess one of the things, I haven't spent huge amounts of time in the Nordics, but when you go there, you realize the size of the region, the scale of a country like Norway or Sweden. I mean, and presumably you have different business styles within individual countries as well, just because they're so big.
Yeah, that one thing, but you also have different regulation in the countries. So if we start there, I mean, legislation can be different in each of the countries or are. Let me give two examples. If you have financial lease, which is pretty much standard way of financing worldwide. In Sweden, Finland, Denmark, it's straightforward. You have a 5-year duration. You have a residual value, let's say 10%. And in the end of term, you will designate a buyer for the equipment. But in Norway, the contract goes into 0% residual value, so nothing. And instead, the customer is offered to purchase the equipment end of term for an amount equal to 1 or 3 monthly installments. So it's different, and that's something you need to be aware of before you launch campaigns. And at least from my experience, I have used a lot of time explaining international vendors when we prepare campaigns into the Nordic countries. And the other example is sale and leaseback, which is also a well-known financial element to be used. And here, local legalization has a huge impact. In Norway, you cannot obtain title to equipment regardless how you structure the contract or the business. The same goes for Finland. But when it comes to Sweden, you can structure the contract in a certain way, but it all comes with extra legal cost and often involvement of an external law firm. So the investment needs a certain size to absorb the cost. And then you come to Denmark, where it's easily to obtain title to equipment. You just need an authorized statement of the equipment. So, yeah, different things to be aware of.
Do you see a situation where there is maybe in the future more harmonization in areas like leasing, where you have more consistency across the countries? Or do you think it will always remain that each country operates to its own rules?
And then I would say it needs to be regulated from the EU. And still, you also need to be aware that Norway is not part of EU, but they have but they have, of course, implemented a lot of the rules. But if we talk about what unites the countries,
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. We've talked about differences.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the Nordics are probably the most digitalized countries in the world. I mean, you find messages and documents from governments, banks, tax authorities. Your pension and even credit cards comes electronically on your mobile. And you are also able to sign them electronically. And as a tourist, you should be aware of that the ticket for public buses, trains, and boats are nearly only available electronically. And when I drive my car, I don't need to bring my driving license. It's all in my mobile. And then, of course, we have the green power from green energy, which is high, really, really high on the agenda in all four Nordic countries. And I mean, I think we must highlight Norway for being the leading country within electric vehicle. Of course, it's subsidized by the government, but they were also smart. I mean, in the beginning, you were allowed to drive your electric car in the bus and taxi lane, which of course makes it easier to come from A to B. And in some countries, you're allowed to park for free. And then, of course, the Nordics, we have a lot of, not a lot, but we have some global companies like Novo Nordisk, Kia, Quinoa and Kona, but I would say the majority of the business comes or consists of SMBs, where you see a high degree of innovation. A great example could be Spotify, which comes out of Sweden as a global success story.
Now, a quick word about our sponsors, Alpha, who are a leading software provider for the auto, equipment, and asset finance industries. Their core platform, Alpha Systems, delivers end-to-end functionality for origination, servicing, and collections, helping customers modernize legacy systems, automate processes, and scale globally. What really sets it apart is its flexibility. It's fully configurable, multi-country, multi-currency, and designed to handle even the most complex portfolios. And that's not all. For providers who want speed without compromise, Alpha Start is a cost-effective, pre-configured solution that gets you up and running with Alpha Systems in just a few months. If you're ready to simplify your operations and scale with confidence, or simply want to learn more about Alpha, visit alphasystems.com. That's ALFA systems.com. Again, why do you think that there is that high level of innovation in the Nordics? Is there maybe there's not a straightforward answer, but are there things that have contributed to these types of companies developing?
Difficult question, but I think due to the size of each individual country, we need to adapt to the outside world, because you will not find specially subsidized schemes for innovation. We all talk about it, but it's hard to develop a scheme or subsidize. And I would say, at least in Denmark, we talk about a lot about innovation, but it's hard to find the investment for these SMPs. And they might scale to a certain size, and then they go abroad, maybe to the US, to find the money.
Yeah, and I think that's been, particularly with the Swedish stock exchange, it's been a recent theme that companies are raising funding, but then ultimately when they get big enough, there isn't the depth of liquidity in the market to support them, and they move to the US.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to go back to the sustainability piece and the EV piece, and obviously Norway has been held up as the poster child for EV adoption. And having been in Oslo about a year ago, every car is more or less electric.
Mm-hmm.
But in the construction industry that you've been involved in, do you see that trend as well, or is it just passenger vehicles?
No, I see it as well. The municipalities often require that if you're going to build in the city, it needs to be done by electric powered construction equipment.
Right.
And we have also seen subsidized equipment from the government if you invest in an electric vehicle, like crane or other stuff. So it's really, as I said previously, really high on the agenda, definitely. And we also, I'm aware of some local large players in the market was compared actually, a standard diesel-driven construction platform or area to work, and a similar with just an electric equipment. And what the outcome was that the electric equipment was the investment in the equipment, and to drive the solution was the pricing was higher because of the pricing of the machines, but they could work during nighttime, so they might shut down the work area before time. That was the advantage. So there's, of course, advantages and disadvantages, but it goes this way, definitely.
You know, it's very interesting, Peter, sort of as you were talking through that, it highlighted, I think, the importance of governments in driving electrification. You mentioned, you know, how municipalities are forcing companies to use electric equipment if they want to win these contracts. And equally, when we talked about Norway and EVs, it was things like free parking or using bus lanes that kind of drove that initial investment. Why do you think, again, and this is a hard question, but why do you think there is such a commitment to sustainability and electrification in the Nordics compared to maybe some other markets?
The overall, I mean, the government might also feel a pressure from the population that we need to go that way. I mean, we cannot have summer times with 40, 45 degrees. I mean, so I think there's a pressure to do something about it. And we also see that in some public tenders, the contractors need to provide how much CO2 reduction, they will bring to this project by using electronic equipment. So yeah, really, really high on the agenda. Yeah.
So look, I think very interesting and lessons for perhaps many countries that are looking to drive this agenda more, that you need buy-in from the local population, or perhaps it's the local population drive the government to support these things. And it's interesting to see how it will evolve in other markets. I want to sort of touch on something that sort of builds on what you talked about. And I recall a colleague of mine who ran one of our teams in the Nordics, and he used to always come with these complex proposals that didn't fit our standard operating model. And when you'd say, well, we can't do this, he'd say, well, we have to because it's different in the Nordics. And we touched on the differences. I think foreign companies in general seem to struggle in the Nordics. Is that again correct in your perception, or is that just a misconception on my part?
Well, first of all, you need to consider that it is a smaller market compared to France, UK, and Germany. So if you go to Germany, well, the size of the market allows you to invest a certain amount of money to be profitable. In the Nordics, it's smaller, and it comes with different cultures, as we already spoke about. But you also need to take the geography into consideration. I mean, Denmark is relatively small to drive around. But when you go to Norway, Sweden, and Finland, I mean, you find long distances, which makes it costly to serve customers in remote areas. And therefore, we see multi-branded dealers representing different and non-competing brands in the segments. But I'm coming back to the solution in a moment. So you also need to consider that the maintenance contract, like in Norway, for example, needs to be profitable in Oslo as it does in Bergen, despite the distances. And it's true, you will find different solutions are required in the countries. In some countries, the customers will demand a higher purchase contract, which is straightforward, whereas in other countries, they would say, well, I need a financial lease, or they are maybe more willing to take an operating lease with some flexibility included. And again, depending on country to country. But there will be, I've heard the same story. You need to find solutions to be in the market. It's not what one standard fits all.
So when you've got that scenario and you're an international company, does that suggest that partnering with local providers is the best way to enter the market?
Depending on the strategy, of course. But I mean, if you want to go in full scale, I mean, you should be prepared
Right.
and read the market before you go there. So it might be worthwhile entering with a partner. And
It's a starting point.
yeah, but if you're looking for a finance partner, I mean, don't go with the cheapest. I often see that it's not always paying off long term. Instead, I would recommend to take a balanced approach, look for a proper service, skilled people with a good reputation in the market. Of course, coverage across the Nordics, IT, good IT-friendly systems that you can use. And of course, pricing is important, but it's not all about pricing.
Actually, as we've been discussing this, you're right. I mean, the scale of the markets, they're small relative to some of the larger companies or countries in Europe. But on the other hand, there's such a high level of innovation, and the markets could almost become a pilot for companies trying to do different things in a smaller market and then potentially bringing those solutions to a bigger market. So maybe that's the way companies should approach this.
Yeah. On the other hand, you need to be able to handle the contracts in a quick way. I mean, you need to earn the confidence of the dealers or the vendors or the customers, and you don't have a lot of chances. I mean, it needs to be right the first time. And therefore, I cannot say it more clear. I mean, if you go there full scale, hire the right people from the beginning. I mean, they need to have in-depth knowledge of the market and really a good business practice. And then what you will find compared to UK or the rest of EU, I mean, the salary level is high due to a cost of living. But again, quality comes with a cost.
That it sounds like a great strapline. Quality comes with a cost.
Yeah.
We've already touched. I mean, it's a complex. We've touched on the four markets, and those are different, although they have similarities. I've also seen many companies sort of investing in the Nordics and then saying, "Hey, why don't we expand into the Baltic region?" Is that sensible, other than geographically they're close, or are the markets very different again?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, in the past, I have been working with lease companies who offered solutions in the Baltic, but I only see few requests and they really never materialized. And I mean, the regular route has been tightening, and today you might only find one or two lease companies who's able to help you there. So my advice should be to engage with a local lease company if you find the market attractive for your business.
And then I don't know if we have any Icelandic listeners to this podcast, but just in case we do, we better not ignore them. So
Sure.
again, you mentioned Iceland is part of the Nordics. A lot of investment, particularly in data centers and all of the related sort of technologies taking place in Iceland. So, I've seen more international companies investigate this. Again, is it feasible to use a base in Norway or in Denmark to expand into Iceland, or do people have to go all in and invest locally?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of requests for Iceland during my time, and often, I mean, I've done single transactions, not many, only few. And they have all been considered case by case because as a lease company, you must ensure that Iceland is included in the license from the financial authorities. So I would say Iceland is covered by the local banks and the local lease companies as a thumb of rules.
Okay, so I think we've established that, the markets are very localized. There are similarities, but for anybody who's thinking of investing, they need to go in with their eyes wide open and realize that it's not a single market. They're very different markets. And to finish off, and maybe to try and summarize all of this, let's say I'm in the unlikely position of a CEO of an international leasing company, and I want to start doing business in the Nordics, and we'll say it's the 4 principal countries in the Nordics. What would be the 2 or 3 most important things that I need to consider?
You should consider how you provide a consistent service level at a competitive pricing. And of course, again, hire the right people. I mean, the chances of success to re-enter a market is quite small if you've already left it. And believe me, it has been tested.
Yes, I think we can both recall companies that have expanded and have left some years later, having sold their businesses to a local leasing company. And it's not uncommon, is probably fair to say. Great. Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to explain the markets to our listeners and to me. Frankly, even though I've spent time in the Nordics, I never include Iceland in the Nordics. So you educated me on that point as well. But I think it's been really interesting to understand how local the markets are. And while there are lots of similarities, you need to approach business in a very localized level in each market due to language, due to business culture, due to the regulatory environment. And I think that's very helpful for any listeners that are thinking of expanding into the Nordics. So thanks so much for your time. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of follow-ups on this topic going forward.
Thank you very much, Richard. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Finance Connect. I've worked for American companies for large parts of my career, and I've spent many hours explaining to colleagues in the US that Europe is not a single country, but a region with lots of countries with different local characteristics. However, when it comes to the Nordics, I've been as guilty as my US colleagues in viewing it as a single region rather than 5 separate countries, each with different rules, regulations, and business practices. I really enjoyed chatting with Peter about how each country is different, but also how they share many similarities, particularly when it comes to innovation, digitalization, and sustainability. I came away from the conversation with the view that having a Nordic strategy is unlikely to prove successful, and instead we need to think of separate strategies for each of the 5 countries in the region. If you've enjoyed this podcast, look out for future episodes on your preferred platform every couple of weeks. You can also find all of the past episodes on these platforms. Thanks as always to our sponsors Alpha Systems, and keep sending us your suggestions for future guests and topics. In the meantime, thanks for listening.